All right. Hey, good morning. Today is what I would call Election Day, or it's part of the whole now new Election Day holiday, which goes over many weeks. We're not entirely sure how long it will last, what it means, but here it is, at least the nominal Election Day we're here. At least Election Day in name only. At least we have that. So we have a little bit of a special, and again, this channel, we've been focusing on double taxation of Americans overseas, and we're part of a very small group. We're part of a very small group who got that proposal to Donald Trump. But and I definitely would want to vote for Donald Trump. And this is what I've summed up kind of the issue as, is that if you listen to Donald Trump, you're not really sure what we're going to get. You get statements that seem to very contradict each other. Some things that are very good, and then some things that, I don't know about that. So that seems to me what I would say Donald Trump is. We're not sure what would happen. He was the man of the people back in 2016, getting not taking on billionaires' money. And now for 2024, he is most certainly more like the traditional politician, grabbing a lot of big donations, and those big donations seem to be driving a lot of his policies. So unless he's duping it, it doesn't seem like, okay, there's some good things and some bad things. And now this brings us to Kamala Harris. What are we going to get with her? And I think we actually know that answer. I think we actually know more or less what we would get. And I think what that is more of the same. If you looked at the last 4 years, I think whatever's been going on, we can expect more of the same. And joining me today to discuss how, and I think we have some I think we have some very good insight into this, because as related to the response that Kamala Harris had, because here it is. Donald Trump says, hey, I'm going to end double taxation for Americans overseas. Many and most Americans overseas are actually Democrats, which I didn't know until recently. So he did that. So what was Kamala Harris's response? And joining me today, I'm going to have Keith at Redmond answer this question. Keith has been instrumental in uniting people to get this through, and to sort of let's not look at this as a partisan issue, right, Keith? We don't want to look at it that way. We want to kind of take a look at everything's going on. So what was the response? So Donald Trump says, yeah, we're going to end just double taxation. There it is. If you're overseas, we're just going to end it. And that's a pretty big, bold move. Now, right. How did the Democrats respond to that? Keith Redmond, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, how did they respond? Well, I think it started with me putting up a post regarding his statement, okay, which was worthy of putting up that post in the American Expatriates for Residency-Based Taxation group. I would have been remiss in not putting up that post, okay? And what I think was good about that post, whether you like Trump or not, is that he made the statement. So it put the issue at the forefront, which is a good thing, okay?
Yeah.
As a result of that, I received a litany of public comments and private messages that were over the top nasty, ranging from, how could you put this post up? You must be a MAGA supporter, to your family should die.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, really. And even a friend of 25 years in Paris just spewed the most nasty vitriol toward me. We're no longer friends because it's just over the top. It was too much. So as a result, I had to ban a number of people from the group. And
all right, here's Keith's group right here too. That's Keith's group. If you're on Facebook,
right. Because the bottom line is, I don't care how you vote for me. I don't care whether you like Trump or like Kamala Harris or detest both of them. I don't care. The bottom line is, this is a serious issue, regardless of party. And if you're not if you're not happy with Trump, what I say to you is, take his statement and go back to your party and push back on your party to say, what are you going to do about this? That's a logical thing to do.
Yeah,
but the level of vitriol that was out there was,
it still is.
It's just too much. It's just
amazing. I mean, and this is what you get, Keith. This is what you get for trying to help people out. And here's the thing: you're their advocate. Like, hey, look, you're getting killed by this. oh, you know, and you're moving it along, but they just don't want to hear it. And I think it just shows, you know, that, I mean, there's some, you know, deep tribalism
and the
that's
thing is,
going on.
and the thing is that, and as I've stated on this call many times before, I'm not a fan of Trump, but I say bravo
Yeah.
for him making the statement. That in
Well,
itself is a good thing.
and
Let's say he's lying, okay? It's still a good thing because it puts it at the forefront.
right. Yeah.
So
If he's lying, it's still a good thing, right? Because now people know about it, and we know how to talk about it, and double taxation.
right.
So I want to turn to our other guest today, the great John Richardson today. So John, what's been the response to Donald Trump, or what the response? Maybe it wasn't the response, but what has happened since doing this? Have the Democrats? Let me see here. Let me put a multiple choice out there. Have the Democrats acquiesced that this is a significant issue and are working to address the problem, or have the Democrats actually promised to clamp down and punish people overseas more? Which one would that be, John Richardson? Where is it going?
Well, sorry, what are the two choices again?
The choices they were going to issue understand that, yes, we understand the issue and we understand the fix to it is to sever citizenship from taxation.
No,
we really should be doing it.
It doesn't matter what the other option is, Anthony. We'll take it.
Yeah, right. So what is this? So, and here's the main topic we're going to be discussing today. That there's a notice, and I didn't pick up on it, John. I really got to thank you for this, because I didn't pick up on it when I read it. I was just like, oh, okay, another notice from the IRS. But you said, hey, stop there. Let's take a look at this to see what's really going on. And really why, I would say Kamala Harris, if she's elected, renunciation, do it now. Like, get in touch with John and I immediately if that happens. That's what I would say. For some of our other people, I'm actually telling them, like, hold on, let's see what happens. So what is going on here? What is the Democrat response, if you would, to the issue?
Well, I mean, I think you're asking two questions. I mean, the first would be, what, if any, was the response from the Harris-Walz campaign? Okay,
Yes.
Which would be, I think, analyze. I mean, how was it a reaction response to Donald Trump's announcement? And the second would be, of course, the Democratic Party generally. So let's start with the response from the Harris-Walz campaign, which was, I would say, the very best characterization you could give of it was that it was an acknowledgement that Americans abroad have concerns that are specific to them. And that might include taxation. It was just an acknowledgement that there are issues. And then there was a little bit of specificity. It didn't really target anything specifically, but said, like, financial access, banking, taxation. I think there were a couple of other things that were mentioned in there. So, I mean, first of all, it wasn't a response to ending double taxation or to anything about taxation. The kindest thing you could say about it is that it was sort of waking up and saying, you know what, we acknowledge that you people out there have things that are of concern to you. Okay. And, maybe.
Which is actually a big move. That's actually progress.
Well, it would be progress if it really, came from the Harris-Walz campaign. But I think it was. I think it may have come from Democrats abroad. One of the things that I find interesting contextually about this whole issue, this is something that the Harris campaign really could have ran with if they wanted, because remember that Kamala Harris, born in the United States at the age of 12, moves to Montreal, Canada, grows up in her teenage years in Montreal, Canada. Her mother is a professor researcher in Montreal, I think at either McGill or Montreal Jewish Hospital or some such thing. But I mean, the point is, and then she stayed in Canada, apparently, at least according to Wikipedia, after graduating from Westmount High, which is sort of a upper middle class high school in Montreal. Westmount's a higher end area of Montreal. Then went to something called Vanier College for a year, if that's true. But I mean, that, so that puts her at about 19, right? So she's clearly living in Canada with a U.S. citizen mother in Canada for those years. And, it's fairly obvious that, at least contextually, that you could not get a candidate better positioned to recognize the problem of U.S. citizens living abroad. It would be impossible.
That would be impossible, right?
But
Yeah,
yet,
right.
not only does she not acknowledge, well, she doesn't deny it, but I mean, certainly, do you know anybody in the world where their teenage years from 12 is some kind of a black hole? No, it had nothing to do with forming who I am. Is this even possible?
Well, yeah. Well, I don't want to get into. Yeah, we could go on for a lot about explaining
the point
that.
is, okay, that contextually, this is the first candidate ever.
There you go. Yeah.
Who really was in a position to say, you know what, I'm aware of that. I get that. Okay. But
wait a minute, John, I'm going to interrupt for a second, because Kamala Harris actually wasn't the first candidate. Obama was the first candidate because he spent a number of years in Indonesia. And as a result, he did put that thing out in 2008 saying that he would support American overseas issues. I still have that document.
Yeah, Keith. Yeah.
I think.
And so, and so I think so. Now, so
I don't think it really matters. I mean,
what we have, I think it does matter. Okay, in the sense that I think both will include Obama then too, right? That these are both Democrat candidates who really, are in a position to acknowledge that this issue exists, and both of them, flat out denied it. Kamala Harris more so, right, than Obama, in the sense that, I find it really interesting that, she seems to have simply wiped those 9 years out of her life. It's as though she thought she was incarcerated.
Yeah. It was like as if she was in a mind control experiment or something like that. It's like, is that that? Imagine that.
But let me ask you this, and I'm intentionally being devil's advocate here. Do you think also part of it has to do with because when they lived, or I'll just speak about Kamala Harris, when she lived up in Canada, it was pre-FATCA. So the taxation stuff really wasn't at the forefront.
I think that's a factor. But I will say this, okay? You're dealing with, a U.S. citizen, PhD, her mother, et cetera, well-educated. If anybody would have been aware of this, I think it would have been somebody like that. But look, here's the thing, okay? Regardless, she grew up in possibly a very significant part of her life outside the United States as a U.S. citizen abroad. That's an undeniable fact. Okay. That fact alone, with or without an understanding of the tax issue, should at the very least have made her more sympathetic, responsive, okay, to the fact that Americans abroad do have specific problems.
Well, John and I would just say I kind of question. I question the whole story, because anyone who grew up in Canada during their formative years, you know what, they would still have friends in Canada, and she would still be friends with a whole bunch of U.S. persons. So it would be on her radar if her story was true. So the whole thing just doesn't seem right to me. Black holes and how she was appointed the candidate without 0 votes to save democracy. That's an interesting thing. Yeah, but I want to see people are filling in. Thank you all for joining us. And now we're going to get in. I really want to get into the meat of our discussion today. The title today.
So before we get there, I want to finish up, sort of Keith's question. So this, first of all, I didn't discover this. Somebody just sent this to me, to look at, and I looked at it, and what I realized was that it was actually nothing new. It was a continuation of Notice 2023-11 from a couple of years ago, which is the lens through which this needs to be analyzed. Now, this comes from existing Biden Treasury. Now, my point here is this. Okay. Now, so your first question is, did the Harris-Walz campaign respond to Donald Trump's statement? The answer is flat out no. Okay, flat out no. They didn't respond. At best, they acknowledge that there may be an issue. All right. But in that context, 4 days later, we have a reaffirmation of Notice 2023-11, which, now listen to me carefully, everybody. All right. Listen to me carefully. is absolutely, positively, indisputable evidence of the position of the Biden administration, aka Democratic Party, okay, that they want to impose direct U.S. taxation on the residents of other countries. Okay, that's what it is.
That's what it is.
Now, why is this significant? Because, I think although I would agree that Kamala Harris is, if it really even is her, which it isn't, response to Donald Trump. I mean, they probably think they responded to it, right?
Oh, yeah.
But this is in the context. I mean, as J.D. Vance and others point out, candidate Harris is the vice president of the United States and is part of the Biden administration, whether she wishes to distance herself from that at the moment or not. Okay, she is part of the Biden administration. And there's absolutely no doubt that the position of the Biden administration is that it's right, just, and equitable for the United States of America to be imposing its tax code on residents of other countries. And we can go through why that is, okay? But any suggestion to the contrary is absolutely lunacy.
And this is the thing I want to say, just in case you're missing it, because here we have this notice to 2023-11, right? And I didn't think too much of it because it wasn't really impacting my clients, because the relief, here's a relief process. Who's it for? Oh, foreign financial institutions. Oh, no relief for Americans? Nah. You don't need that. We're going to give relief to these foreign financial institutions who actually probably do need it, to tell you the truth, not to diminish their, because they are tasked with enforcing the U.S. tax code on their citizens. And if they don't, they have a gun to their head. They have a gun to their head. If they don't, the penalties can basically end their bank. Because the U.S. dollar is still somewhat, I guess, I don't know, BRICS is what BRICS is going to be doing, but the U.S. dollar is still the reserve currency. So if international wires are seized or inbound wires are seized, that's the end of the bank. So the banks have to do this. Otherwise, terrible things happen. So
let's
go ahead.
Context, okay, how this come into being and why, okay, because I think it'll make a lot more sense.
Okay.
All right, so trying to keep this as simple as possible. All right, so everybody understands that, in the beginning we had FATCA, and then we had the FATCA IGAs. These intergovernmental agreements were designed, to generously allow countries to comply with FATCA without violating their own internal laws, simply by changing their internal laws to legislate FATCA in their countries, okay? But part of the FATCA IGAs, part of the responsibility, the obligations of these foreign banks, okay, aka your local bank, is of course to identify U.S. persons, but then to acquire their U.S. Social Security number to turn that over to the IRS. Okay, so that's part of what they have to do.
Number, please.
In order to avoid penalties from the IRS. Right now, the problem with this is, of course, I'm going to call it the reality of it is that there are American citizens outside the United States who don't have Social Security numbers or who are unwilling to supply to those banks, right? One or the other. But you see, if the bank is aware of a U.S. citizen and doesn't have the Social Security number, then the bank is in non-compliance, and can be subject to these penalties. Now, at the end of 2022, and most of this is seen through the lens of these, whoever these accidental Americans are, but it affects a very large number of people, okay, who just happen to be, U.S. citizens living abroad, okay, or whatever. But so there was basically, for a number of years, there wasn't, the requirement of finding the Social Security number, okay, and turning over to the IRS was relaxed, and that ran out at the end of 2022. And there was a lot of panic among some of these banks, saying, "Oh my God, we're going to be in breach of our FATCA obligations." The fact that they can't comply, of course, is irrelevant, right? But we're going to be in breach of our FATCA obligations. So, I mean, the U.S. Treasury, these are good people. They're good people. They're reasonable people. Okay. And they said, so what we're going to do is we're going to create notice 2023-11, and we're going to say, you know what, we're not going to punish you. We're going to recognize that, by God, you are in breach of your FATCA obligations. You are in breach by not supplying these Social Security numbers, parenthetically, that you can't get anyway. Okay, but you're in breach. Okay, but what we're going to do, because we're kind, reasonable people, is we're going to give you 3 more years. Okay, for this problem to be solved one way or the other. During this 3-year period, we undertake to not designate you as being non-compliant, provided that. Okay, now this is not. Now notice, this is not. We understand the problem. Let's kick the can down the road for 3 years. Absolutely, positively, no. It's conditional. Okay, and what it was conditional on was, first of all, that the foreign bank is in an eligible country. Now, an eligible country has to agree to do some things, specifically to facilitate FATCA and citizenship taxation on the red. They have to do something.
What is an eligible country? You mean one that is
right now? An eligible country is a country that meets these, that includes this. 1, they have to agree to encourage all U.S. citizens in the country to give a Social Security number to their local bank. They have to promise to independently punish the foreign bank if the bank isn't doing this, okay, et cetera. So in other words, the first thing they're doing is they are enlisting the government of the foreign country in finding U.S. citizens, okay, and encouraging them, saying, you know, you're a U.S. citizen, please go to your local bank and give them your Social Security number so it can be sent to the IRS. Please do that. Now let's look at what that means. So the Canadian government should have been taking out full-page ads in papers. Are you or have you ever been an American? If so, do your civic duty to the government of Canada. Please go to your local bank and give them your Social Security number. Help our banks help you. You know, this sort of stuff, right? Then there's a separate provision, you know, that says, you know, they have to, you know, really lay down the law to their own banks, right? Come on. Look, you know, you may think you're a Canadian bank, but your obligation is to the IRS. We want you go find these goddamn U.S. citizens, you get their Social Security numbers, and you turn them over to the IRS. So that's what an eligible country is, a government that. This is just the plain text of the thing, by the way. Okay, all you have to do is look at the text.
All right, we're going to
have to do some stuff as well.
Oh my! So that was notice. Yeah, now we called this. I mean, we called so notice 2023-11.
Yeah,
provides temporary relief to banks, and interesting because the title of this one of our podcast today is the Biden administration's final FU to Americans abroad. So this is 2023. So why are we calling the topic of today what we're calling it today?
Because the 3-year period ran out. Okay, it was for 2022, 23, and 24. So they've had to extend it.
All right, hold on a second. I just got to say, just so people can understand how it works. So John, just to clarify, and this is nothing really out of the ordinary if you know U.S. tax. So this notice is for 2023 and retroactive for 23 because the problem's so much like, okay, yeah, you guys haven't done it. So, okay, we'll give you a relief for those years.
On December 2022. All right. It's
okay, did. Okay, did.
When it came out. All right. Okay. Now, look, I think part of the problem, one of the things I've discovered about this is that, you know, you got this comment on your Facebook group, for example, Keith, you know, that people see, they don't see the history of this. And they don't see you know, sort of the progression of this stuff. Now, I want to read you, and I think this is really important. Okay, really, really important. I want to read you an excerpt of a letter from U.S. Treasury to the Dutch government on this issue, and this was in 2022 on this issue of. You know, they're saying, look, the Dutch embassy saying, you know, Jesus, you know, I mean, we just can't get these. These don't exist. Our banks they're going to be punished, but we can't comply. I mean, you know, this makes perfect sense because the U.S. government would say, well, you know, the fact that's your problem. You can't comply. The fact is, you're not. Or rather, the fact of the matter is, you're not in compliance.
You're not trying hard
now,
enough.
I want to read you okay, an excerpt from this letter, and after I read the excerpt, I'll click on the link and see where this came from. But this is a senior Treasury official writing to the Dutch embassy. All right. And this isn't necessary to understand the context of this. Okay, here we go. We value our collaboration with the Netherlands in countering offshore tax evasion and improving international tax compliance. Now, bear in mind the context. This is about the Dutch banks complaining that these goddamn Americans won't provide their, who live in our country, won't supply their Social Security. Now, let me back up. Here we are. We value our collaboration with the Netherlands in countering offshore tax evasion and improving international tax compliance. We believe it is in our mutual interest for U.S. citizens resident in the Netherlands to continue to be able to access basic bank accounts in the Netherlands in order to conduct their ordinary course daily financial activities like the receipt of wages and payment of bills, right? Now, for those who are voting for the Democrats, understand that this is the Democrats' view of what you should be restricted to, okay? But yeah, sure, vote for them anyway, all right? Now, however, here we go, ready? However, we wish to again emphasize that obtaining a U.S. TIN from U.S. citizens holding accounts at foreign financial institutions, pause, listen to me carefully, all right, pause, including accounts located in their country of residence. Wake up. That is a clear statement that they're going after Americans abroad, okay? Clear, including accounts located in their country of residence.
Yeah.
And this, by the way, is in the context of they start off about tax evasion, right? All right, is crucial to ensuring that the U.S. Internal Revenue Service has the tools it needs to determine whether U.S. citizens are complying with their U.S. tax obligations. That's the quote. Now, my comment, in other words, the purpose of FATCA is to enforce U.S. citizenship taxation on residents of non-U.S. countries who happen to be U.S. citizens only because they were born in the United States. Now, you disagree with that? All right, you can tell me why. But it seems to me that is absolute proof positive, right? That this is a senior Biden Treasury official writing a letter to the Dutch government in a context just before Notice 2023-11 is laid out that a principal purpose of this is to go after their own residents who happen to have been born in the United States. It's right there. Okay, this is not speculative.
And John, thank you so much for that, because it's in their own words. Because you remember, FATCA was passed, and the little play on words they had was fat cat. Oh, thought they were so clever, fat cat. So that's really, that's what that was the claimed purpose behind FATCA. And now they've just sort of leaned into, and then it was the unintended consequences of FATCA, right? That's what it was. Oh my God, these unintended consequences of FATCA are destroying Americans overseas. And now the U.S. Secretary of Treasury is like, yeah, and we want to. Yeah, actually, now that we want to. Now that it's out, yeah, what we said was that we're going after these people, but we really want to go after regular people because, hey, that's what it is. And something I was just sort of looking through the notice, John, I wanted to share this with you very quickly, and want to share with everyone very quickly, because I think this gets to really the heart of the matter here. And this just sort of, it's just hard for me to read this without just laughing and being sad, because we're back to the notice here, and we're looking at each Model 1 IGA requires that the Model 1 IGA jurisdiction obtain and exchange the information. And I highlighted that word exchange, and I'm trying to think to myself, okay, so these banks are exchanging information.
No, they're transmitting information.
Yeah, there you go, Keith. Yeah.
There is no exchange. It's transmitting information one way. It's
not two-way, it's one way. And they use that word, I think, intentionally to sort of, hey, it's an exchange. Well, so, in a contract, like, okay, so what are we getting? Hey, we're giving you all this information. And what are these foreign financial institutions getting in return? Oh, we're not going to ruin your business. Look at that. Hey, aren't we so nice? We're not going to drive you out of business if you don't comply with our exchange request. So I guess that's the consideration, because I guess the U.S. always has that right to destroy anything around the world whenever it wants to. And if they don't want to destroy you, and if they won't destroy you, then that's consideration. That's consideration. Amazing how this law goes. And I do see a lot of people are joining us today, and I do want to get to a lot of questions, and we're going to get to them at the end. So so if I haven't gotten your questions, we're going to get them to the end. So, and I see a lot of people joining us and hopping on. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, I do need to bring up, because John, you just outlined the situation of why this is delayed for another 3 years. And I think we would be remiss, or I would be remiss, if we did not bring up what Fabian Laagra had said, who's the president of Association of Accidental Americans, because his take is a little bit different. And I would love to get your response on what he wrote. I can read it out loud if you like.
It. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, why don't you read it first, Keith? Thank you.
Okay, give me 1 second, and I shall do that right now. Okay, so it says, this is from Fabien. Now mind you, it's a translation from French. From my very well-informed contacts on the subject of this delay, the American administration is working on a relief on this problem of missing Social Security numbers, in parentheses, specific to accidental Americans, close parenthesis, but they first want to finalize their analysis of the impact of the current relief. It is very likely that the American administration, by extending this notice, wanted to give itself more time, nothing to do with Kamala Harris's letter, in my opinion. The presidency of the Council of the European Union has a new meeting on the subject with the American Treasury in the coming days, and the European Commission also has a meeting with the Treasury scheduled for early December. Now, mind you, he did say from his very well-informed contacts, and I do know he does have very well-informed contacts. That I do know for a fact. So what do you think about this? Do you think it's just they're pulling the wool over their eyes, or is there something else going on behind the scenes? Well, I don't know.
All right, what do I think? I mean, we can take it apart. There's a few things that he's trying to say there. Okay, I mean, the first is the comment about it being unrelated to Kamala Harris. Of course, it's unrelated to Kamala Harris. Okay, I mean, this is coming from the current Biden administration. I mean, what this is, how it relates to Kamala Harris's statement, okay, is simply that there's absolutely no doubt that the Biden administration, aka Democratic Party, a party that she's clearly part of, is intent on enforcing citizenship taxation on the residents of other countries. I mean, that's very, very clear. I'm not saying that those two statements are related. What I'm saying is that I think that Kamala Harris's claim should be evaluated in the context of the clear policy of the Biden administration. Okay. And, coincidentally, 4 days later, I mean, it is coincidence because the left hand never knows what the right hand is doing. So Treasury comes out with whatever this is, Notice 2024-78, which is really a reiteration of Notice 2023-11. So I think, how it relates to the Kamala Harris thing, I don't think has anything to do with the issue. Now, on the second point that he makes, that he says, the American administration is trying to work on a solution to this. Well, of course they are, because it's to facilitate U.S. taxation of residents of other countries. I mean, this is not, he sees this probably as, a carve out somehow for accidental Americans, and therefore
for them to not have to give Social Security,
and therefore
that they don't have.
Good for them. I mean, it may be good for them, and that's fine. Good, all the power to them. I mean, if they can get some carve out for themselves, but to suggest, if you're even a minute, that this is not related to and part of the process of trying to enforce U.S. tax rules on residents of other countries is ridiculous. In fact, the way he describes it, he's just saying, well, these European representatives, they're going to be part of the process. They're going to sit down with Treasury, have a meeting or two, and talk about how they can help facilitate the U.S. taxation of their own country's residents. That's what it is. So, I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand the point that he's really making here. I mean, it's true, but it doesn't have anything to do with the broader issue. Or it may be true. I don't know. He knows, apparently about these meetings, right? But I mean, if they're true, the purpose of these meetings is to find a way to cooperate so that they can cooperate to better facilitate U.S. taxation in other countries. as per that Treasury letter, in 2000, prior to the 2020
Right.
election.
And the part that I'm not understanding is, so let's say, just for the sake of discussion, that they get some carve out. So certain Americans overseas, including accidental Americans, don't have to give their social security number. Well, then what is that going to look like? What does that mean? Does that mean that FATCA is only going to be for a select few? And
Great
these
question.
people are exempt. So that means that they are exempt from citizenship based taxation. And the ones who have social security numbers will have to adhere to it.
Okay. What we've seen is a pattern, okay, over the years of so the way this starts out, right, is you have a rule that affects a relatively large number of people and they're all upset about it. And then what happens is you begin to get carve outs, right? It's like the Titanic is going down and a certain number of people get lifeboats. And by giving carve outs, what you do is you weaken the support for getting rid of the broader problem. So, the comment that you're reading, is really, well, this isn't a problem, because it might help accidental Americans, that's what it really is. And I understand that, and everybody wants to save themselves, right? But the divide and conquer principle, all right, is front and center of a lot of proposed solutions to this. I mean, we see this, for example, in the buyer bill, right? Let's find something that helps enough people to quell discontent, leave the broad principle of harassing residents of other countries intact, and just let those people go down, to save a smaller number of people. And I've got to tell you that not only is this wrong strategically, not only is it wrong morally, but I'm going to be honest, it's about the most offensive thing I've ever heard, right? What the divide and conquer principle is let's let some people slip out from the clear application of the law, okay, and leave other ones, there to take the whole thing. Now, let me tell you how they're doing this, okay? And I saw some other comments on this. Again, I really recommend that people actually read what's going on here rather than, just, some clip, with a conclusion. Now, I'm going to make a statement here, okay, that part of what this is about is telling accidental Americans or any other Americans abroad that, buddy, either you comply or you renounce your citizenship. I'm going to repeat that. You either comply or you renounce your citizenship. Now, how do I get there? Well, I'll tell you how I get there. Pull up, Anthony. Pull up my post from 2023-11. Go down.
I think I have the one you want right here.
Pull it up there and go down to the section that
I'm there.
That puts requirements on the banks. Okay.
Okay. Is it? Did you get it? Hold on a second. Not yet. Hang it.
All right. Now look it down.
Too low?
Down slowly. Okay. So that's 01. Go to 02. I'll tell you when to stop. Okay. Hold on. Just stop there for a minute. Okay. Continue on down next. Continue on down. Okay, I mean, this gives more specificity. By the way, this applies only to pre-existing accounts. But anyway, okay, next, keep going. Okay, now pause there for a minute. Wait, 305. Now this, by the way, is where you'll notice this puts the requirement on the government of the country, right? But we passed it. It was either 304 or 303. Go up now, 304 or 303. Okay, hold on.
No, I think this is it. 3.
Okay, now go down slowly. Go to point 03. But then you have to stop so I can read it.
We're missing 3.
Okay, all right. It's somewhere else on the post. But let me tell you what it says. Okay, let me tell you exactly what it says. What it says is now the obligations on the banks in return for not doing what they can't do anyway. So they're required to reach out, to these U.S. citizens, send them letters, continue general harassment. But here's what the harassment has to include, okay? I'm not making this up. A link to the relief procedures for former citizens.
Wait, what'd you say?
It's a link. The letter from the bank, okay?
Oh,
it's required to include the link to the relief procedures for former citizens. In other words, it's saying you can get out of this by renouncing your citizenship. Now, I'm going to repeat what I just said, and I want to know if you agree.
Oh my God.
Agree with me. What they are doing is they are getting the banks to deliver a personal message from U.S. Treasury saying you can get out of this if you renounce your U.S. citizenship and use the relief procedures. Now, you tell me how that is not a message to Americans abroad that's not comply or renounce. Help me with this, okay?
Okay. So I need to unpack this for a second. So what you just read, and I'm saying this, I'm pretending to be ignorant because for our audience, are you reading this from the new IRS notice?
I'm reading it from the original IRS notice 2311 and from the reinstatement of it in 2024-78. It's in both of them.
Okay, so here's my question, and it's a bit of a rhetorical question because I deal with a lot of people, as you know, around the world. Some people have received FATCA letters that has that in there about the relief procedure, and other people do not receive FATCA letters from their banks with that information included. So who makes the decision to include the information or not to include the information? Because it's not done consistently across the board.
None of this is ever you're talking about the execution. You're not talking about the requirement. Now let's separate these two things, okay?
Okay.
Requirement, everybody, and Jesus Christ, this is plain as day. I don't know why people don't, read this stuff. Okay.
Well, they don't, John.
Plain as day.
Yeah.
That, that part of what the banks are required to do in order to not be sanctioned for for not doing something they can't do anyway, okay, is to send annual letters to people who are suspected of USness, okay, who are suspected of USness.
Right.
And, the letter, in fact, I was talking to somebody last week, okay, who's in this position, all right? And what was in this case was it was translated from English, so they didn't quite get it exactly right, but I could see what they were trying to do. So the letter, they have to send the annual letter to the person suspected of USness, okay? Then there are things the letter has to include. And one of them is links to further information. And one of the links to the further information is, in fact, or maybe I should say in FATCA, okay, in FATCA, a link to the relief procedures for former citizens, aka how to renounce U.S. citizenship and get out of this. Now, all you people criticizing me, saying it doesn't say renounce your U.S. citizenship or comply, you tell me how that is not the equivalent of you comply or renounce your citizenship.
Right.
Isn't it?
Right. Yeah. So John, this is where it gets very muddy, and this is where I'm confused. And I kind of go back to about the Social Security number situation. I've worked with a few, and I know you have as well. I've worked with a few U.S. persons, meaning Americans or accidental Americans who were born in the U.S., and they did a formal self-certification to their bank giving reasons why they should not be identified as a U.S. person. And a number of banks have accepted it. So they're not being identified as a U.S. person. So that means it's already happening that, that they are not going to be identified as a U.S. person, even though they have a U.S. place of birth. So,
no, that's not what it means, Keith. Okay.
Well,
the self-certification procedures kick in once they've been identified as a U.S. person.
Yes.
It's an accusation, and they have a methodology which is prescribed in various IGAs to rebut the accusation. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
And there are standard ways of doing that. Now, let's not confuse what the rules are with the execution around the world from bank to bank, because there's a lot of financial institutions. Some understand this well, others don't understand it. And it varies from country to country. Okay, now let me give you an example here. All right, that In most of the IGAs, once a U.S. place of birth is identified, we'll work with that. Okay, you have the opportunity to self-certify in a very prescribed format why you have relinquished U.S. citizenship under the Immigration and Nationality Act, but do not have a certificate of loss of nationality. Now, that is a rather specific kind of self-certification that requires, I think, specific steps, to be managed successfully if the legal department of the bank knows what they're doing. Okay. Now, now that's the word relinquish, but there are a few countries where relinquishment is not enough, where it's the word renounce, in which case, technically, no self-certification is even possible, right, under the existing rules. Now, that is a separate issue from how do some of these individual banks behave, okay? Now, of course, if you're dealing with a small bank, that has a legal department that doesn't understand this, you may be able to get some of this stuff. I'm not going to call it bogus. I'm going to call it, because it's not. What I'm going to call it is self-certifications that don't meet the standards of the prescribed in the FATCA IGA, okay?
Okay.
You get, a certain amount of that, etc. But, you're getting at this point, even, well, it's hard to say, right? It's hard to say, because then the question is what constitutes a self-certification, right?
Yeah.
But to do it properly, it's not just, I've lived in France my whole life or something. And,
well, that's what happened with one of the people with whom I worked. That's what she outlined. She lived in France all her life, and the only thing
Keith, look.
Well, I'm just telling you what
happened. Huge difference between, how an individual bank might interpret something.
Yeah.
And what are the requirements that are consistent with these IGAs? The only thing I can comment on is, what the IGAs say and what would or would not constitute a self-certification. Now, you can send in anything you want. In some cases, there may be some cases, and there are, where banks will accept it, but there's plenty of other cases. Some of these larger Canadian banks that won't accept these things, even if they're done in accordance with the FATCA IGAs.
Exactly.
All right, guys, I want to go over. I found exactly where the enforcement is in John's article, and I just want to go over it right now. Let me add this here. So here it is, and here's how it works, right? To satisfy the requirements to make an annual request from each account holder, blah, 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 blah. We'll get to that. Here it is. Here's the things. In addition to communication, by the way, you have to find them in the way most likely you'll get in contact with them. That's going to think, like if it's going to be email, phone call, text, whatever it is, mailing, you have to do the way most likely to get in touch with them. So here's the thing that you must include. And I guess either of the following, John: the web address of the State Department's joint FATCA FAQs, or the link to renounce your citizenship. And I think here, here it is, right here, plain as could be, right there. So let's just sort of recap what happened. And I think, Keith, it's a wonderful thing that you recall what Barack Obama's promise in 2008 was: hey, it's an issue here.
Well, what he said was in 2008 that he supports Americans overseas, and he's going to be and I'm paraphrasing, and he's going to be a president for all Americans, including Americans overseas. Then 2 years later, FATCA comes into existence.
So, and that he didn't come in, he signed it into law. So here it is. And so here it is. And this is, I think, where we're really seeing the fruits of the Democrats' efforts is they passed a law to make it so you have to renounce your citizenship. There it is. They're like, if you have a hard time complying with this, just renounce, right? There's the solution. And remember, according to Elise Bean in the FATCA hearing, there's a lot more people who want to come into the U.S. She's that's not really a big deal. They're like, no, we want you to renounce your citizenship. And that's what the U.S. Treasury is saying. Like, I know FATCA made your life terrible, so the solution is just not being American.
That's right. And, exactly. Their solution, the whole relief procedures thing was put together to cleanse, the United States citizenry of accidental, Americans or people who don't have social security numbers. That's what it's for. Okay. I mean, if you look at the relief procedures, for God's sake, all right, one of the most interesting things about them, and this is good. I mean, it's very good. I mean, I continue to use these things all the time to help people, right? But it's interesting that you don't have to have a social security number to use the relief procedures. You do need a social security for any other kind of filing. I mean, the more I listen.
Right. And so, I mean, well, John, thank you for that, because there it is. If you can't get a social security number, you don't want it. Okay, well then renounce. There it is. There it is. They're telling you right there.
Say it again. Okay. And, nobody agrees with me on this. All right. And what I find, I don't find it frustrating that nobody agrees. What I find frustrating is that, nobody agrees, but they're not willing to read what's actually going on. Okay, they just don't agree. Okay, clearly, at least from my perspective, this whole thing, right, that is now, part of the deal, right, part of the wink deal with these foreign financial institutions, where they won't be punished for not doing things they can't do anyway, is that they are supposed to, send this stuff out to these suspected Americans, showing them how they can renounce and avoid the whole problem. Meaning that the banks are cleansed of the problem, all right, the U.S. government is cleansed of the problem, etc. This is definitely designed. I mean, I'm not saying that, I think a lot of these people are perfectly happy to renounce, no question about it. But make no mistake about it, there's a lot of people who are not perfectly happy to renounce or can't renounce because they don't have another citizenship, for example.
Right.
Who are being oppressed by this whole thing. All right. Now, what really should be happening here is, which of course will not happen because of the divide and conquer principle, what really should be happening is that, first of all, the discussion should be, no, we're not going to help the United States impose taxes on our own residents. No, we're not going to do that. Okay? And then work out from there, instead of, well, we're going to send a delegation to Washington to sit down with Treasury to talk about how we can facilitate U.S. taxation on our residents. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. There's another thing I need
better off simply requesting to become U.S. territories, if that's what they're going to do.
Yeah. And again, I have the link right up here so you guys can see it. This is it. This is it. If you do not have a social security number, don't worry, you can renounce, folks. There it is. There's a solution. Hey.
Do you find this as disgusting as I do? All right.
Well,
I feel like
there's even more to it. Go ahead, Keith.
I do. I find it disgusting, but I also find it to be a nightmare scenario for the foreign financial institutions because it's not foolproof. Because you have Americans who were not born in the United States and they have not identified themselves as Americans with their banks. Do you see what I mean? They have a non-U.S. passport, let's say a French passport. They were born in France, but they also have U.S. citizenship, and the banks don't even know about it. So that means they actually do have Americans part of their customer base, and they're recalcitrant because they're not adhering to FATCA.
Well, that is right, Keith. So the banks have two options available to them that, nobody ever discusses, okay? But since we're this far into the discussion, why don't we talk about it? Okay?
All right.
The first option they have, if you look at the FATCA IGAs, it's not all accounts that are required to be reported, okay? As always, there's a carve out for depository accounts up to 50,000 US max. So if the issue really is people paying their hydro bill, okay, which we know it's not, but this is how Treasury frames it, of course, okay? But if this really is the issue, the way these foreign banks can respond is simply by restricting U.S. persons to accounts that are depository accounts and simply program, okay, the thing that if the account balance ever hits 50,000 to kick them out of the bank. Okay, that's the first thing they can do. But I wouldn't go that far. The proper response to this is for these banks to kick all the Americans out, because that's the only way that this problem is going to come to a head. It's the only way.
But they're not going to be able to kick all the Americans out. That's my point. They cannot do that. If I'm French and I'm born in France and my bank only knows that I'm French, but I do have U.S. citizenship, I'm an American banking at that bank. That bank is not going to know about me.
They can kick out the ones they're sending letters to. they're sending letters to people based on a suspicion of U.S. That group they can kick out.
Yeah, Keith, I think you're bringing up a good point. And that's why the banks have to exercise their due diligence. So hey, are you an American or have you ever been an American?
Right. And guess what? People will check.
Yeah, I know, right? I know. I know it's the best citizenship in the world, Keith. But amazingly, people don't want to admit to it around the world. Incredible thing. We're the best country in the world. Oh my God, we're about everything about freedom. Just people don't want to admit that overseas.
Guys, the detail overwhelms and obscures the issue here. Okay, let's forget these details and go back to the main principle. The principle, and this is in the words of Treasury, but we know it anyway, that the U.S. government is using FATCA to try to facilitate U.S. taxation of tax residents of other countries who don't live in the United States. That's the broad principle here. Okay?
Right.
That's what's going on. Now, the problem is that these foreign government banks have all of a sudden decided, well, wonderful. What can we do to help you? I mean, are they out of their minds?
Look, I gotta get to my voting station, so I do want to wrap it up here. And I want to get to some comments, and I also want to just point something out that I happen to know. I happen to know this because I am a tax attorney, and people tell me things, and I get confirmation of things from other people's stories. So here's something I know for a fact. This is a pattern of conduct by the IRS. Somebody makes a whistleblowing complaint against someone incredibly wealthy. And I mean incredibly wealthy. I'm not talking someone with $10 million in a bank account. I am talking about billionaires. This is a pattern that I have seen multiple times, and I'll probably get some of these people on my show. I hope to. But the fact pattern goes like something like this. Somebody who is working for a billionaire or one of his entities discovers blatant tax evasion, takes copious notes of it, documents it perfectly, has everything set, files a whistleblower complaint with the IRS. Okay. The IRS whistleblower complaint alleging, oh my God, this actual FATCA. I mean, I'm talking about people who own Major League Baseball teams. I'm talking about people who may have run some of the biggest pharmaceutical companies that were not publicly traded, that are no longer with us. Some of the most obvious blatant tax evasion is presented to the IRS in these whistleblower complaints. And what the IRS does with it, it's all there to scrub the evidence so that there's never anything that ever happens when some select people, if you are wealthy enough, powerful enough, you can basically flout the U.S. tax code in the most brazen ways, using things such as loans to people that have no intent of paying back, and such as doing things as creating fraudulent invoices that you're paying overseas in order to send money overseas. And I have two examples of this happening. I could tell you the names of who involved. I'm not sure if I want to go down that road yet. Wouldn't mind getting a third one, though. So if you have made a whistleblower complaint and the IRS hasn't done anything about it, you reach out to me. I'd love to have you on the show because I have two other guests who have been indicating that they would want to be on to share their story. And it's utterly shocking. And this whole idea, and this whole idea, because the U.S. income tax starts on a fraud. It's all a fraud. The first promises were like, hey, look, only the wealthy will be paying taxes. Regular people won't. Now that's inversed. Now that's the complete inverse of it. The people who get it the worst are the people who are not the wealthiest. The wealthiest have resources we don't have to get results that we can't possibly get. And so I think that's an incredible thing to understand about the U.S. tax code. It truly is a criminal conspiracy. The U.S. tax code is 100% a criminal conspiracy. And as Donald Trump actually mentioned on the Joe Rogan podcast, he said this is what he said, just sort of casually. He said, well, I'm kind of more of a tariff guy because that's sort of, protects American interests. And he said something like, well, yeah, the income tax came in 1913, and that just really wasn't Americans. You know who wanted that, though? These foreign companies wanted, these foreign countries wanted the U.S. tax code because it put us at a strategic disadvantage. And I don't think people understood the import of what he's saying. What he is saying is that the U.S. income tax is an armed insurrection, an armed foreign insurrection against the American people. And when you look at the results of FATCA, right, we don't need to go to the billionaires to see like this is all a joke. We don't need to go to billionaires who can do the most flagrant, obvious tax evasion imaginable. We don't need to go there. We could just look at this. We could just look at this. FATCA is created to find information about regular people. The Democrats are fully aware that it's regular people who it's going after. And what is their response? Like, oh yeah, we know it's regular people who are getting destroyed by FATCA. So yeah, why don't you just renounce? Why don't you just go ahead and renounce? Can you go ahead and just renounce so we don't have to deal with your stupid complaints? Because we're really tired of listening to you. So that's where we are right now. Incredible times that we have. This is again from things that I know from my firsthand experience. And then also the things that people tell me, the things that I have seen, it is so bad. People have no idea how bad it is. So with that, I want to hit to some comments here that we have here. So let's see what we got for some comments. All right, Mirza, earlier comment, got to get this Communist Party out of the White House. I think it's the entire government, so I'll just go with that. Okay, the issues. Okay, we covered this. Oh yeah, so we're getting comments from Twitter. This is awesome. Yeah, the issues when you're overseas, if you're a Nung. And we're talking about here. You know, this is we're talking in regards to Kamala Harris. Again, I'm not sure what her exact story is. There's a black hole, so I'm not going to really believe much of anything. Here we go. Borshel, nice to see you this morning. Appointing voting is an insult to the Democratic Party. Right, exactly. Right. She was Kamala Harris was appointed, so the Democratic Party is a walking contradiction. It is a walking, talking contradiction. We believe in yeah, exactly. Here we go, Borshel. Yeah, whose fault was it beneficial?
The Democratic Party. Okay, I think this is extremely important to understand. Is a group of people who believe that the political process is to benefit those who come together as the party. It has no interest whatsoever in any form of representative democracy that would include the public. And, you know, I would highly recommend two books that are very readable and explain this historically and the evolution, okay, of this. They're both by a guy named Thomas Frank. In 2015, he wrote Listen Liberal, okay, which was after you know, the Obama presidency, just pre-Trump. And then in 2001, he wrote What's the Matter with Kansas? And both of these are essentially expositions of how the Democratic Party changed course and became what it was, starting largely with the Clinton administration. The second thing I would recommend is this: a brilliant. If anybody who follows Heather Cox Richardson's, no relation, Substack, on November the 3rd, go. It's heathercoxrichardson.substack.com. Go to the November 3rd one, because it talks about the Democratic Party. Well, what it is, okay, it's talking about the upcoming election and, you know, the importance of I would say, you know, grassroots democracy, but it also talks about the history of the Democratic Party contextually, right? And how, you know, its origins were as the party of slavery, you know, et cetera. And, you know, obviously Keith will jump in and say, well, you know, things change. You know, of course things change, okay? But there's no mistaking, okay, the historical roots of the party, which is essentially to consolidate power and influence among a small group of people, specifically excluding, you know, masses, okay?
I think there were definitely problems with and I would just say, as I've been reading more up on the lead up to the Civil War, and it does seem that both the Democratic Party and well, the Republicans, of course, were not interested in representing the interests of Americans. I don't know.
it's a problem of all Western democracies. Okay,
right. No, and well, and we're supposed to be a republic, which is not a democracy, but that's
Canada. Obviously, every bit as much. But we're talking about this in the U.S. context, and what accentuates and aggravates the problem, and this is just my opinion, is the fact that it's only a two-party system effectively in the U.S. And as I used to say in the Soviet Union, a two-party system is only one party removed from a one-party system. And
I think it's a one party. I do think it's a one party.
Kamala Harris, without any input from the public, it reminds me a little bit of the Politburo or something, right?
Crazy. All right, so here we got another comment. McNello, yes, the Biden administration is won by Biden. That's so obvious, and no one even will say. No, like it doesn't even matter. Well, who knows what's going on? Oh, hey, Fashion City. Hey, thank you so much for joining us today. She's going to be voting. I assume you're fashionable. I'm making an assumption that you're female, but you could be male, obviously. You're voting for Jill Stein, right on. So you're going to try something else. This is definitely a point because it could certainly work this way. Your comment here that Trump's tariffs on trade for other countries will help BRICS grow and grow and grow.
I agree with that.
And I would agree with you if we don't have reasonable tariffs on that. So yeah, you got to watch that. And tariffs, are the reason why the Civil War started. Or I'm sorry, the War of Northern Aggression. Let's just talk it like it is.
Well, Anthony, on that point, right? You talk about the whole tariff thing. I mean, this is a great opportunity for the fair tax movement. Right, because I think part of the context of tariffs and that is a recognition that the Internal Revenue Code is so unbelievably oppressive and such a problem, right? So the idea here is in part simplification as a revenue measure, and I think
but I don't think you can. I don't think you can be more simple than tariffs. And the president has
or the fair tax, right?
The fair tax is all on. They want to impose that on all new goods, so whether they're made in the U.S. or not. So. Again, I don't necessarily believe that, well, if we just go to an, sales tax system, that'll be in control. No, the problem is the federal government, whatever it is, they're going to find a way to make labor sales. Trust me, they'll find a way. Oh, we're just going to do it like this, but then they expand it. Really, it's just the problem of the federal government. The federal government gets to decide the size of the federal government. That's the problem, and we'll never fix that. So under the current system, there we go. Sue, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us from Portugal. You can't wait to fire the incompetent Kamala. And I'm just wondering, who hired her, right? She got there without anything. She was one of the least popular Democrats in the 2020 election. She was unpopular. And then somehow she got appointed, after Bernie Sanders, who got more votes, just was no longer the nominee, and Joe Biden ended up getting that. Then Kamala Harris, who didn't get any votes, becomes the vice president. So again, when was she really hired and for what? So, and what is she doing? And she doesn't even claim to be responsible for any of the disasters of the Biden administration. So, I can't wait to see her go. I think it's really that laugh of hers is really the thing. I think that's probably the most troublesome part of that laugh of hers. How does someone with a laugh like that get elevated to the position that she's in? And why are people allowing it? So I think that's where we are.
That has nothing to do with it.
Oh, please. Please.
Come on.
Oh, please, Keith. You're not letting me be nasty. Come on, Keith. It's election day. I could be cruel. Right. All right. So here's all right. We'll pricing. Thank you for this comment. If Harris wins, BRICS will go faster. I would tend to agree.
Regardless, they're going to grow regardless.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Part of the thing with, there's a fascinating article, excellent exposition a few months ago in the Washington Post talking about U.S. sanctions that are visible sanctions. And it was a great article, but what I found interesting was the omission of the 24/7 sanctions, that the U.S. imposes on the world, which would be FATCA, citizenship taxation, generally leveraging the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency. That's the number one sanction on the world, right? And I might add, right, that inflation in America aggravates the sanction, right? Through the exporting of the dollar, et cetera.
Right, exactly, right. And our inflation is borne by the world. U.S. inflation
is that the rest of the world has no choice but to find a way to gradually remove reliance on the dollar, because at the moment it's the oxygen supply of finance, and the U.S. is simply cutting off the oxygen, right? So the rest of the world needs to remove themselves from that, and this will happen. It has to happen.
Yeah, no, because and I would say that the U.S. dollar is a sanction. The U.S. dollar is a sanction, and that Russia was forced. I mean, they didn't want to do this, but they were forced because they couldn't use the U.S. dollars to create a way for trade. So the time to stop BRICS was many years ago. They've gone through the hard part. In my mind, they've gone through the hard part. They've gone
Russia
through the
is not doing badly at all. I mean, you may recall at the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine, there was this notion that, well, these U.S. sanctions will solve the problem, but clearly it hasn't.
No.
And now look at who's paying. Another thing that's important on the sanctions is the third-party countries that pay the price on this, right? By having to cooperate with this sort of stuff. And that's also true with the extradition. The extradition treaties are another form of sanction.
Yeah,
incidentally.
there you go.
Anyway.
So, all right, well, there it is. I have to get to my polling station to vote
do your civic duty.
To do my right. Yeah, I love this. Hey, you really don't agree with either one, or I guess I could go with Jill's side. But hey, do your best. But I think where it's going to come down to, I will reveal what I'm going to do. I got to vote for down ballot because I got a buddy of mine who's running for state rep. I'll be doing that, and I will be voting for Donald Trump. Because again, when I go back to my own syllogism, is like, we know what we'll get with Kamala Harris. We know what we'll get with Trump. There's bad things I don't like. I don't like some of his foreign policy initiatives there. I don't really like that part of it. Why we are having, I really don't understand how 0.2% of the world population is the number one issue for Americans. I really don't understand that, and that's very concerning what's going on there. Otherwise, I see from Donald Trump things that would indicate a removal from a dominated world like that, and he has said incredible true things about the income tax. And well, I guess this is it. We really don't have a choice, so I guess I could just not do anything. And there's something there too, but I don't know. Maybe I'll change my mind on the way. And I want to thank Keith so much for joining us. Keith, you already voted, so if we could keep how you did secret. You've already voted, and John, what about you?
I'm apolitical.
You're apolitical.
I'm apolitical. I'm not interested in politics.
There you go. All right. Well, politics are interesting to you, my friend.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see here. Thank you so much, Ari Sue. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. We want to get this out there because this is really the truth of it and the truth of America right here. You're seeing it. The values of a country, to quote the great John Richardson, the values of a country are reflected in its tax code.
No question. Absolutely. So all you have to do is tax code.
All right. Yeah. Final words, Keith?
Yeah, I just think the bottom line regarding this podcast, regardless of what party you would like and don't like, you're an American overseas, you need to wake up and smell the coffee, because this is some serious stuff that is happening to you. And you really need, the devil's in the details, as John stated. So you really got to read this
details.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John, concluding remarks?
There's a lot, no matter what happens, okay, the United States is in serious need of democratic renewal. There's no question about it. There's no really great outcome to this election, but I think that there are better and worse outcomes.
I think the best, and I think the best outcome that we can have from this election.
Clearly, from the perspective of Americans abroad, clearly, and everybody's already voted, but the worst thing you could have done was vote for the Democrats. I mean,
Yeah, and I would get it. Look, if you don't want to vote for Trump, I get it. If you don't want to vote, I don't understand it. But voting for the Democrats is most certainly
a vote for the Democrats
is most certainly the wrong thing.
It's a vote.
That is a fact.
It's a vote for FATCA and citizens.
It's a vote for FATCA, and it's a vote for you to destroy. It's a vote to destroy your citizenship and to make it really not mean much of anything.
Absolutely.
That's what it is. Well, I want to thank everyone today for joining us. We're going to be picking up this discussion as we're going on, and we'll probably talk about the relief procedures for former Americans, because I guess, that's going to be all the rage.
And I think we should also talk about the, how would you say, the newer forms that need to be completed for renunciation. Maybe we can.
Well, I think there's some updates to it. So I think that's
updates.
we're gonna So that's a great one. So we're gonna cover for the next time. We're gonna cover the updates to the relief procedures for Americans, which is certainly a nice segue to conclude here. If you are considering renouncing your citizenship, you have two incredible experts on this call. The great John Richardson. You could reach out to John at Citizenship Solutions at proton.mail. Before we get to myself, we'll get to Keith Redmond. Join Keith on Facebook. Here's his group right here. And by the way, if you are thinking about renouncing your citizenship and you're not very trusting of the U.S. tax industry, with good reason, I would suggest you reach out to Keith beforehand. Keith talks to people all the time who are stressed out, freaked out about what to do. They've been told things that may or may not be true.
Yeah, we explore all your options based on your particular profile and circumstances, and formulate a strategy.
And do you scare the crap out of people, Keith? Is that part of what you do?
Not.
Oh, you don't do that. Well, that's wonderful. So you don't say, hey, you're going to go to, you don't say things like that, or you don't say you're going to go to jail. Well, that's wonderful. That's such a nice thing to do. It's so simple.
I know.
Really, really appreciate you having on the show. And finally, for myself, if you are considering renunciation, streamline, or having some international tax issues, maybe an audit or anything like that, any IRS resolution, I've been doing IRS tax resolution with a particular focus on international compliance for the last 20 years. So you can reach out to my firm, schedule a time right here, IRSMedic.com. I am at Thavot and Partners, but I still have IRSMedic.com still up because it's such a wonderful branding channel, isn't it? Just go to IRSMedic.com, offshore, schedule a time to speak with us. And we also do tax preparation. If you're actually a little bit late, we might be able to help you out. So that's something that we also do too. And your tax prep is going to be required typically before you renounce. So we can help you out with that too. So with that, I want to again thank everybody for joining us today. Exciting times for sure. And I guess, and I just guess here's what I want to do. You know what? I tried, for years, I tried to create a podcast to make it interesting. And sometimes it was difficult. In the 2010s, it was difficult to find topics to discuss. And now it's a bounty. I want to thank the U.S. government for giving us so much to discuss. I want to thank our dysfunctional political parties. I want to thank our broken political system for giving us so much system to discuss, leading us to greater and greater views every episode. So again, thank you, U.S. government. Thank you for all you do. This is Anthony Parent, Keith Redmond, John Richardson. I invite you to follow us on Twitter, like and subscribe so you know we're going live, and then you have comments, you can join in the discussion. We really, really enjoy that part. So again, thanks everyone for joining us today.